Hello there, good evening. You're watching the Press Preview, a first look at what is on the front pages as they arrive. Well, it's time to see what is making the headlines. That is with the Daily Mirror columnist Susie Boniface and the writer Benedict Spence. Hello to both of you. They'll be with us from now until just before midnight. So let's take a look at what is on some of those front pages. Well, the Eye says that new figures showing the UK heading for 2 years of recession have prompted Rishi Sunak to delay his plan to grow the economy. Meanwhile, the Telegraph carries warnings that expected public sector strikes in the coming months could lead to an increase in crime. And the Express hears that officials from the UK could be posted to France in an effort to curb migrant crossings in the Channel. And the Times understands plans are being drawn up which would ban care homes from refusing residents the opportunity to see visitors. And the Financial Times reports on the collapse of the cryptocurrency firm FTX. And The Guardian has a story about the alleged behaviours of Cabinet Minister Dominic Raab. He denies any wrongdoing. And The Star offers a response from the Britain's Got Talent contestant about whom Judge David Walliams could be heard making derogatory sexual remarks in off-air footage. And The Mail criticises a senior police officer for being too politically correct because he raised awareness of what it's like for women to experience the menopause. And The Mirror has the latest from I'm a Celebrity and former Health Secretary Matt Hancock's interactions with his fellow contestants. And according to The Sun, ITV have been condemned for allowing Mr. Hancock to eat a certain part of a camel's anatomy. And a reminder that by scanning the QR code you'll see on screen during the programme, you can check out the front pages of tomorrow's papers while you watch us talking about them. Well, we're joined tonight by Susie Boniface and Benedict Spence. Hello to both of you. Rock and roll Friday night, talking about the papers. I was just reading the headlines there. You can see that they run the gamut, didn't they? Pretty wide range of things for us to talk about tonight. Let's kick off, though, with the front page of The Eye. Prime Minister delays growth plan as UK heads for recession. It was all about growth only about 6 weeks ago, wasn't it, Susie?
Yeah, and this was one of the things that he wanted to do. You know, there's talk here. He had planned to cut tax on things like business investments in capital projects, but that announcement was expected quite soon. But he's just not going to be able to do that. The circle that Rishi Sunak has to square in the public finances is simply not allowing him to do the things that were expected and that were needed. And there's other bits of the papers we won't get to talk about later on, but that there's actually some concern that while Rishi Sunak is trying to steady the ship, as it were, and adopt the orthodoxy and improve confidence in Britain PLC, there is some concerns that he's going to be overcorrecting and perhaps cutting too many things and the wrong way and a bit too soon, so that the slump we're all going to go and experience in the next few years is going to be far, far worse than it needs to be. And of course, the figures that came out today showing that Britain is the only G7 country that's heading into recession does rather back up the fact that Britain's economy, for some bizarre reason, has got something strange going on in it that isn't affecting every other developed economy.
Yeah, well, what could that be? I wonder. Those figures also show that we are the only economy, Benedict, in the G7 that's got a smaller economy than before COVID. Suggests to me that really growth shouldn't be forgotten about. It's what's needed.
Yes, it's a story of Tory economic hokey-cokey. We had Liz Truss, who went a little too hard for growth, and now we've got Rishi Sunak, who's going a little too far in the other direction, and they just can't seem to quite get it right. And I mean, I think that this does need to be borne in mind. First and foremost is that this is, I think, going to be a sign that the civil strife within the Tory party isn't going to go away in much the same way that there was a lot of backlash against Liz Truss. Perhaps it'll be a little quieter, a little more studied, but nonetheless, there's going to be a lot of opposition from within the backbenches ventures to Rishi Sunak. And, this is going to mean that, we've talked at great length about how the adults are back in charge, back in the room, and that we now are back to steady government. I don't think we are at all. I think we're going to see a little bit more Tory backstabbing as we go forward. And, it wouldn't be the Tory party if there wasn't that going on. But, more broadly, yes, it must be very concerning for a great many people, coming off the back of, a lot of people will say coming off the back of the lockdowns and the coronavirus, but it's not just that. It is decades of underperforming, of a failure actually to fix roofs while suns are shining, to prioritize things like growth, because actually that's the time when you need to be looking to these things. It's not in the aftermath of a series of massive shocks to the economic system. It's when things are going well. And, post 2008, with George Osborne and the coalition and austerity, Britain wasted a decade, basically, of potential growth, which other members of the developed world didn't. And it does now look as if we are going to go back down that route again. You have to have prudence, but really we should have learned from the last 10 years of experience. Ultimately, if you don't allow people to grow, they can't fund themselves, they can't pay the taxes, they can't afford the public services, and you end up in a cycle of regression.
Yeah, causing consternation, the Eye also points out, amongst the business community, amongst whom relationship with the Conservative government hasn't always been what it should be, has it, Susie? Let's also talk about other people which may have some concerns about what may come out of this autumn statement next week. This is in the Times. This is the top-rate taxpayers. Susie.
Yeah, there's some suggestion that maybe about $250,000. What's happening at the moment? Let's just go back a little bit. What's happening at the moment is that there are Treasury briefings going out fairly consistently to journalists about all different mad things they might do. And they're flying lots of kites to see what goes well and what doesn't go well. And one of the suggestions here is that 250,000 people could be made to pay the top rate of tax. And these are people who are earning big figures. Okay, so these are people on six-figure salaries. And that they're going to be perhaps introduce, bring them into a higher tax band, or maybe even there was some suggestion I saw a couple of days ago about bringing back the 50p tax rate, which Gordon Brown had. Now, whether or not this is happening, who knows? It's one of those things where there's lots of journalists trying to find stuff out, and you hear things, you go, gosh, that's good. But you can't substantiate it because there is no way to substantiate whether option A or option B is definitely happening, because neither option A or B has actually been decided yet. It's all still very much up in the air. And so the journalists are saying, we've heard something, but it's all built on rather shifting sands. And that's not the journalists' fault. It's kind of the fact that the government can't really decide. And they're so lacking in their own confidence of their own economic ideas and ideals that they're literally having to float it in the pages of the Telegraph or the Times or the Mail every day to see if it would work or not.
Yeah, it's almost like governance by focus group.
They know.
Yeah, well, I should apologise to our viewers to having to look at those rather unedifying photographs of the former Health Secretary there in the Times, treating himself to what looks like a rather unappetising hors d'oeuvre. Let's move on, shall we, to the Telegraph. Benedict, another day, it almost feels like another day, another strike gets announced, more industrial action. This is the Met warning about what the knock-on effects of that will be.
Yeah, I was just going to say, actually, what's more painful for 250,000 workers? Is it the fact that they're going to have to pay more tax, or is it being subjected to Matt Hancock on your television every evening? Yeah, it's a pretty difficult one to
well, at least he's not dancing.
I mean, it's early in the series. Who knows what could happen? Anything is on the table. What have I done? I've just sort of ushered a dreadful sort of mental image onto everybody.
Yeah, you've taken us also into a cul-de-sac. Industrial action, Benedict.
I have. What were we talking about? Sorry, before Matt Hancock.
Yeah, we're talking about the Met warning about industrial action. Police.
Yeah. Honestly, though, this is. I mean, this is, of course, the other thing that goes on, doesn't it, when you have sort of an economic crisis, is that you have industrial action, you have strikes from public sector workers who are being left behind. Of course, we've been talking a great deal throughout the last week about the nurses' strikes. And now we're, moving on to the Met Police, who are suggesting that time that is spent on healthcare is going to make things very difficult. It's going to stretch demand on public services. It's going to distract the police from doing their job because they're going to have to be sort of, stepping in to assist. And just generally speaking, I'm terribly sorry. There is a cat that is trying to climb up my leg, and it's absolutely just.
It's all going so well, isn't it? See?
I'm terribly sorry.
Well, it is Friday night. The cat doesn't know you're live on Sky News, to be fair to your cat.
It doesn't. But it will know soon.
I think it's probably it's a good place to go to the break, and you can do whatever you need to do to mollify your cat in the meantime.
Terribly sorry.
Plenty to talk about after the break. Do stay with us. Coming up, Susie's going to be telling us more about her campaign with the Mirror to get justice for Cold War veterans who've had their health severely damaged by exposure to nuclear materials. You can join us after the break for a discussion about that. You're watching the press preview with me again, Susie Boniface and Benedict Spence, perhaps without your cat this time, Benedict. Susie, let's come to you in the Mirror. This has, of course, been part of your campaign for recognition for nuclear veterans.
Yeah, so in today's paper, which is, I suppose, on yesterday's press preview now, we ran a front page story and 4 pages inside detailing the results of a 6-month investigation, which established that the Ministry of Defence had had blood and urine samples of those men who served at nuclear tests back in the 1950s and 1960s, and that they had told Parliament these things didn't exist, that they had told veterans that the records didn't exist, and then when they did know the records existed, they were withholding them and refusing to provide them to veterans. And we run a story basically saying that these could potentially be a criminal offence. We showed this evidence, some of it, to Boris Johnson when we met him in June. He agreed then as Prime Minister that it could potentially be a criminal offence. Labour are calling for a public inquiry. There's going to be moves afoot in Parliament about it next week. And now what's happened is that when he was running for office back in August, Rishi Sunak said he would support a medal for these veterans, but also, most importantly, he said he would support a criminal investigation to see if service at the tests to get Britain its nuclear deterrent had constituted a crime against the test veterans. So when we had this story, I went to number 10 and I said, hey guys, you'll never guess what? I think we've got some evidence that there may be some crimes. Does Rishi stand by the thing he said in August? And I went to them maybe 3 times during the course of the day, maybe 4, can't remember now. And in the end, they refused to make any comment whatsoever. They just put out one standard comment from the government, which is it's completely untrue. Not addressing any of our detail, not talking about any of the evidence, just utterly unable to bat away any of it, just going, no, nothing.
Yeah, but a particularly uncomfortable note today, isn't it, on Armistice Day?
Exactly. It's Armistice Day. Rishi, as everyone did, observed 2-minute silence at 11 a.m. But unfortunately, he's also maintaining the 70-year silence these veterans and their families have had to endure. And despite going to him again today and saying, look, please, will you have another opportunity? You've seen our evidence. Will you still support a criminal investigation of these veterans? There's silence. There's not even no. There's not even I'll think about it. Silence.
Benedict, a very quick word from you about a big blow up in the crypto world.
Oh, well, this is a staggering story. What's the most money you've ever lost in one day? I bet you've not lost 32 billion that's just disappeared, but that's what's happened to FTX. It's one of the cryptosphere's largest exchanges, or it was. It now no longer exists after the CEO of a rival firm called Binance basically called it out that it couldn't continue to operate. Within a day, it had basically admitted, FTX's founder, Sam Bankman-Fried, had basically admitted that it couldn't function anymore. And just like that, poof, the money was gone. The situation has collapsed. It's caused a huge run in the cryptosphere, Bitcoin down, Ethereum down, all sorts of things going off. And I mean, why this might sound a bit of a niche story, but actually Sam Bankman-Fried, the founder of FTX, he was somebody who made real roads in...
Apologies to jump in there, but I'm going to have to cut you off because we're out of time. So we're going to have to leave it on that cliffhanger there.